Welcome to Archetype, the podcast that explores ideas that shape the human experience. In this episode, we'll explore how to break free from the status quo bias and upgrade your company's approach to customer centricity. We'll discuss why relying on assumptions and guesses can be risky and how customer intelligence data can help guide product decisions. We'll also talk about how losing current customers in one channel can potentially lead to losing them in every channel, and the importance of ensuring a consistent customer experience to elevate your organization's overall output. Our guest and leading expert will be Debbie Levitt, founder and principal at Delta CX, also known as the Mary Poppins of CX and UX, and author of Customers Know You Suck, Actionable CX Strategies to Better Understand, Attract, and Retain Customers. It's a very fun and informative book in my opinion, and it's highly worthy of having a space in your bookshelf. Welcome, Debbie.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Debbie Levitt. My company is called Delta CX. I've been a CX and UX strategist, researcher, designer, speaker, trainer, various things. And I specialize in really anything that could use a change agent. So sometimes that's a CX or UX project where we're doing some research. In fact, we just finished a project where a startup came to us and said, we don't know what problem we're solving. And we did a 6-week research project, and we completely designed their business and their business model and their ecosystem. So we can do that. And then last year, I was brought into a $1 billion German company to try to help them be more customer-centric and raise up their UX department and practice. So the services that we offer at Delta CX, and I try to get personally involved in every project, truly range.
I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that it's highly important for the future. If we don't harness this space appropriately and how businesses should function moving forward, we're going to be at a huge disadvantage as a species. And I love that you're on the cutting edge of this movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So I'd love to start with the importance of using customer intelligence data to drive decisions by understanding why relying on assumptions and guesses can actually be dangerous for businesses. What would you say are some common pitfalls of relying on assumptions and guesses when making product decisions?
It's really a false sense of confidence, and it tends to start with, we know our customers. And so it ends up a false confidence sandwich. You know, we start with a layer of we know our customers, and then we add a smear of we know what they need and we know who they are. And it is just layer upon layer of guess and assumption. And we rarely look at that in the moment or look back at that project later and say, oh, holy cats, look at the time we wasted. Look at the money we wasted. Look at the customer trust that we wasted. Look at how much customer support had to help those people or apologize to them, or, someone had to go out on Twitter and calm people down. And so we forget that while going with a guess feels fast, it sounds fast, but we're not looking at the larger arc of the project where we've ultimately burned a lot of time and money on what's essentially someone's gut feeling, or I know what people want. And it's amazing. We're running an experiment right this second in my Slack community, and I asked them to put into it, what should I buy a 52-year-old woman? And, just because I'll be 52 next year. And so we're like trying to see what ChatGPT thinks someone should buy for me. And it's like all over the place. I mean, talk about guesses. ChatGPT can't know me. We can only know our customers when we are observing them and interviewing them and asking the right questions. Because even when we try to do some research, we're very often asking the wrong questions. We're asking, what's our product missing? Well, compared to what? What do you want? What do you want? These are questions, but they're not great questions.
Absolutely. I think that one of the common misconceptions, at least right now, is that ChatGPT is actually going to take over the persona of what we do as, UX professionals or CX professionals or human-centered professionals, whatever you want to call us, that are ushering in the experience itself. So I think that there's going to be a lot of amazing applications for it, but there's no substitute. We need to be as connected to the actual end user as possible. We need to know them inside and out. If we don't intimately know them, then we're not going to actually make any progress on our side, right? It's a relationship. The more you get to know the person that you are trying to form a good relationship with, the better you're going to anticipate their needs. The better you're going to say, yeah, I know their behavior. And that's why we need to set things up correctly. And ChatGPT it's not personable. It's not. And the industry, what needs is more human connection, not generalization.
Or stereotyping. Yes. Because the first experiment we ran in my Slack channel was like, what's a good product for a 50-year-old woman? And it just went with generalizations and stereotypes, like she probably needs something for menopause and she probably likes technology. And I'm like, wow, these are incredibly broad, and these aren't actionable. Even if your company gets this back from a language model or whatever, how you don't even know what action to take. And that's where, and we know we don't know what action to take when we find that we're fighting over opinions. If your teams are fighting over what the product manager likes versus what the engineering lead likes versus what someone else likes, you don't have the evidence. You don't have the data. You haven't been observing your users, because if you did, you would probably be aligning on who these people are and what their unmet needs are instead of fighting over opinions. And so that's a sign that we don't have the right evidence and data to create better strategies or decisions or products.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. So let's move over to understanding how can customer intelligence data help guide product decisions more effectively. Now, just to clarify to some audience members, when we say customer intelligence data, it is the intelligence that it's actually pushing you to make the decisions that you have to make, rather than blindly making them, which we just talked about, just having assumptions and guesses. So how can customer intelligence data guide product decisions more effectively, Debbie?
Yeah, a lot of times people will sit around a meeting room and say, well, what do these people want? Well, what can we do to make them happier? What can we do to retain them? You now have unanswered questions about who your target or current customers are and how you can attract them, satisfy them, and keep them. If we don't know those answers, then we're probably guessing. We're probably fighting over opinions. Usually someone will say, well, let's just run a survey. Surveys are fast and cheap. We can ask people what they want. But that's not really the correct research method to use, and it's often manipulated. Surveys are often poorly written, they're poorly interpreted, and very often they're accidentally or unpurposely, if that's a word, written to tell us what we're hoping to hear. And there's so many stories out there, and they're usually written with clickbaity headlines that say things like, Walmart lost $1 squillion by listening to customers. And, this company nearly went out of business by doing what customers wanted. And it's misleading because usually there's some sort of poor or flawed research was conducted. It gave people a false sense of confidence. They made decisions and went in a certain direction, and it ended up being backed by bad data. And so the problem is that makes you feel like we're doing a good thing. We've got the data. We ran the survey. We did the focus group. We know what we want. So I tell people, try not to do too much without doing the qualitative research and having experts do it. Qualitative research is great. Qualitative research guessed at by people who aren't good at it is not going to be great. And our company does believe in specialists. We still have engineers doing coding. We still have product owners or product managers. We still have marketing people. We believe in specialists. And so we should make sure that when it comes to this research, you want to put the right researcher in front of those customers. The people who tend to run surveys may or may not be good at observational research, and that's okay. Find the people who are. So these are some of the things that I am suggesting that people take a look at, because customer intelligence is going to be the quantitative, but more importantly, the qualitative data that we have. And one of the exercises I've been teaching people, which I think is in chapter 18 in my book, is you just make a little quadrant in anything, a Miro board, a whiteboard in your office, wherever people are, and just write things in those quadrants, in those 4 spaces, like what I wish I knew, unanswered questions, guesses and assumptions, and potentially outdated or incorrect information. Now, those might sound like the same thing, because they kind of are. We're just trying to get people to put these virtual or real sticky notes in any of these quadrants, doesn't matter where, to say, hey, we're thinking about doing this project or building this new feature or expanding our market or whatever it might be. Or we just had an A/B test fail because evidently our new idea is worse than our old idea. Hey, what are our unanswered questions? What do we wish we knew? What don't we know? And then a professional researcher can look at that and go, hey, why don't we press pause before we do another round of risky and expensive guesses? We have unanswered questions. I, or my team and I, can spin up the research that will answer these. We'll then be armed with great customer intelligence that we can use to make better decisions, to prioritize appropriately, to truly solve users' problems and not just boost business KPIs. It's an exercise that you can do at absolutely any point of a project, and it's really easy. It's the kind of thing you can do in a half hour or an hour. This is not a 5-day workshop.
And that's excellent advice. I'd also
Thanks.
add to that, if you're not understanding the fact that users must come first, then you're falling behind.
Your business only has users and customers. That's it. Whether they're primary users, primary customers, secondary customers, whether they come to you through partners or resellers, whether this is a 2-sided marketplace or a 3-sided marketplace, whatever your business is, you offer products, services, and experiences to some sort of customers. And if we don't make these people happy and we can't keep them, then the pressure's on sales to keep bringing us new people who we can make miserable. But this ultimately is an ecosystem that doesn't sustain itself.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to identify customer needs. You have to understand user behavior. You have to be able to evaluate the product's performance. And I'd say the best thing, look at that, that's beautiful. And I think that the best thing is you have to anticipate market trends. You have to anticipate user trends so that you could actually apply it and move forward.
We could anticipate those if we understood people, because there's only so much you can anticipate a market trend by reading another report from big consulting company X.
Mm-hmm.
Big consulting company X is giving the whole world the same advice when you download their white paper. You can start there if you want, or you can talk to ChatGPT, but you have to be looking at your customers. You have to be looking at their needs, their mental models, their workflows, their tasks. These are the types of things that the companies we tend to admire the most do. People tend to admire Apple. I tend to admire Walt Disney Parks and Resorts. And these are companies who still believe in R&D and spend noticeable millions and billions on R&D. Yet almost every other company on the planet cut R&D.
Absolutely.
They said, we don't need these slow, wacky, researchy, sciencey, wacky white coat people. And it's like, no, you needed them very badly. And this is why you love Apple, or this is why you love going to Disney World, because these people took the time to figure out who you are at your core and how to make the thing or whatever that just lights up your mind. So I'm not saying go be like Apple. That's hard. And there's things that they do wrong too. But we have to take a look at how we can bring research in before we are running with guesses. Apple doesn't run with guesses. Apple doesn't release minimum viable products. Apple doesn't rush crap out. And sure, they've made some mistakes and some have been high-profile mistakes. But again, I'm not expecting them to be perfect. I'm just saying overall, they appear to have a good way to do this to create the most customer satisfaction and loyalty.
Absolutely. That kind of leads me to my other question for this section, which is, and it might be a little spicy, but do you think that there are any solid examples? I love your animations. Do you think that there are any solid examples out there in the wild of any organizations that have been successful in actually using customer intelligence data to drive decisions and actually improve their products?
Yeah, it's so hard to know, but because first of all, there's almost like some sort of depressing Venn diagram there. Like, first of all, let's name a company that's been improving their products. Ouch, that's hard to think of. And then which of those companies used good data to get there? Ouch, I don't even know. I will say that one of my favorite companies on the planet, and this is not sponsored, is definitely
Mhm.
Monday.com. I just think the world of Monday.com, I think they're absolutely interesting in so many ways. And every time I interface with them, I'm always impressed. And I'll give you an example. I was trying to write a formula in one of my columns. It's kind of project management software, but then it's kind of make it whatever the heck you want system, which I love that flexibility. And I was trying to write an incredibly complex formula. Now, what's a company's options when someone's trying to do something edge casey, really wild? You can say, sorry, we can't help you. You can say, go read the help file. You can say, well, we formatted our stuff like Excel. Go look up Excel formulas and figure it out. You can say all kinds of things to that person. And what they actually said to me was, can you tell us a little bit more about what you've tried so far and what your use case is so that we can really understand why you're trying to write this formula? And then we're going to pass this to our formulas team because we have a team who works on advanced complex formulas, and they'll write a formula for you and come back and let you know what the formula is so you can try it. And they did.
Interesting.
Now, it took them a few days, but I didn't have to pay extra for that. I'm already paying them. And that to me was such a great customer experience because it felt like there was a human connection there. It felt like someone seemed to genuinely care about what I was trying to do and why I was trying to do it. And not to poop on me, but to help me. And then they actually had a specific team designed to help me. And when I compare that to your typical customer service experience, to me, it is just like a shiny, sparkly, fantastic adventure. And so, is Monday.com using data? I don't know. I don't know if they're using it. I don't know how they're using it. I only know that when I interface with them, I almost always have a great experience and I feel like they really listened to me. And that's unique. I mean, let's throw it to you. Can you think of a company that has made you feel that way?
I think that it's one of those things where every company that I can think of, there's a space, a sector that they're doing really good at. And it could be luck. It could be just luck, and that's fine. But some things that come to mind are Apple. You mentioned Apple. Amazon, to a certain degree, I could say some really nasty things about, certain experiences that Amazon has produced. They had this, I think it was like maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. If you try to unsubscribe from something, especially on Amazon Prime, and you try to look for that, the best way to find it would be to search it on Google. How horrible is that? That you have to use a third party to actually find it. So there's
And that
a
could
lot
be
of problems.
deceptive design as well, which we used to call dark patterns, and
Yep.
now they're called deceptive design.
Yep.
Sometimes things have been put into place on purpose to make it hard for you. I'm trying to cancel an account right now, and they're making it so hard for me. I've been going back and forth with support for days, and I feel like I'm just gonna have to put aside an afternoon so I can try to cancel this account. It's unbelievable. It's not worth it. And is it really worth the word of mouth? I'm not going to name the company because I don't even want to give them any play. But hypothetically, I could name the company and say, these people, I mean, they've already been in the news as jerks, so I'm not sure I could make anything better or worse for them. Or, hey, I could go on a show and I could be heard by hundreds, thousands, even more people. And I'm out here saying these people absolutely sucked. Customers know they suck. And I'm trying to cancel. Is it worth to piss off customers when nowadays we can spread that word quickly through social media and other connections to hundreds or thousands of people? I have 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. If I didn't like something and I wanted to talk about it, I reach a lot of people in minutes.
Right, exactly. Because you built that platform But again, going back to this, I think that we could say some things about Amazon, at least to a degree. They're a good example of trying to talk about that customers are highly important. And even just that, just mentioning that as a company is a step in the right direction.
A little bit. So my thing is, be careful. For some people, when they talk about customer centricity or Amazon is user obsessed, somehow what that sometimes ends up being is we're obsessed with how we can manipulate the user, or we're obsessed with what we can sell the user, or we're obsessed with turning the customer into the pawn we push around the chessboard. And so I want to make sure that people remember that anything that's customer centricity or user obsession is supposed to be about delivering things to customers and users the way they want it to work, the way that for them it would be no-brainer, easy to learn, easy to use. It just works. Like when people take that new phone out of the box and it just works. So Amazon can say customer centric, they can say user obsessed, but I often feel like their customer centricity or user obsession goes as far as what they can sell me or what they can try to push me to do. I don't usually feel like the Amazon system was designed for how I think and behave. I often think it was just designed, as just, just e-commerce to try to get me to buy more. But I don't feel like it's personalized well. And so are you still customer centric or user obsessed? If we have a pile of stories, I mean, my book is printed by Amazon, and I can't tell you how many of them have come to me with torn covers and water damaged pages and torn up boxes. Amazon, you have one job. You started out as a bookstore. You should be able to ship me a book that isn't torn. Okay, this one's in pretty good shape, but I have a pile of books. I think I had to award this one to myself. I wrote my name in it to remember to not sell it to anyone because it came to me damaged. And I've got a pile of them. I was just at a conference. I had to give some away because people were finding damaged ones on the pile. One of them was sticky.
Oh, no.
So, we can say Amazon is customer centric, user obsessed. They get it right a lot of the time, sure, but there's always room for improvement. We can't rest and be complacent that sometimes we get it right.
But I'd say that in general, from what I can remember in regards to data and the cultural UX maturity of enterprise, or the surveys and reports that I've gotten my hands on, as well as the experience from over 20 years of being in the industry, I think that the 1% is probably 1% of enterprise or organizations are at the level that you and I would say, this is perfect. But I think that the majority, it's just horrible. It's a bad experience. And there's no real culture. There's no real maturity. There's no, in regards to, experience design.
There's no accountability.
Accountability is really big. I think that there's a lot of avoidance of actually taking ownership of something that is non-existent. And I think it's because people don't understand the importance of having a customer centricity approach to everything that you're doing. But that leads me into talking about the risk of status quo bias within organizations. It's a perfect segue there. So since it's usually an invisible type of effect that's happening within the organization, I know it's it's a major factor in preventing real progress in adopting customer-centric approach.
It's definitely one of the biggest problems. And what I find, how it tends to play out in the real world from the experiences I've had is, well, we're making money. We have clients, we have customers, we're selling stuff. So we must be doing things right or mostly right. Why should we change? And I think that people get very comfortable in the status quo, especially when they can point to some sort of success. where they can say, well, look, we have more revenue this year than last year. We've got more customers. Our NPS score went up a point. These are all things where we tell ourselves we're doing well, and that status quo bias makes us not want to change. It can make us fear change. It can make us afraid. Well, what if we change? Our NPS might go down a point. We might lose some money. Oh my gosh, let's not do that. And so people tend to get a little bit stuck in their ways. And that's when people at companies tend to hear things like, but that's how we do it, or that's how we've always done it. And it's so funny because my favorite cognitive dissonance is when an agile coach or agilist will say to me, what, we can't spend more time on research, or what, we shouldn't take another look at our processes and try to change it. And I say, remember when we weren't agile? Like, remember when you didn't have a job? Remember when you were a sales guy or you were something else because your job didn't exist? Now you're an agile coach because everyone wants to be agile. We did change. We did make that change. And we're still making that change because agile is its own mess. But I love when people who were part of a change or whose job is supposed to be about change tell me we can't change. So I'm always like, agile, tell me more about what that word means.
Absolutely.
So I think that it's easy to get caught in that status quo, but it's cognitive dissonance, because very often this comes from companies who say, we want to be innovative, we want to be disruptive, we want to jump past the competitors and be the market leaders, we're going to be innovative. Well, remember, the definition of the word innovative is to invent something new that's never been seen before. Those of you who took Latin or speak a Romance language will recognize the nova in the middle of the word innovation. It is completely new, never before seen. Not an evolution, not iPhone 12 to iPhone 13. That's evolution. We're talking revolution. And it's amazing that these companies who are so afraid to have any introspection or retrospection and claim to want innovation also don't want to change. And I say, pick one.
I totally agree. I've heard this line a lot. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. And to a degree, when you're trying to get things done, well, just focus on things that are not fixed. And I agree. But sometimes that thing that isn't broken and doesn't need fixing
is broken.
It's really broken. It's like building it's like if I poured a foundation, and this is where your comment on MVP, I really disagree with MVPs. There's a time and place for everything.
I don't like MVPs either.
Right, but there's
neither does our customers don't like them either, by the way.
Oh no, they typically hate it if it's not done right.
Customers don't want minimally viable anything.
But it's one of those things where we're building this home and we're going to pour the foundation. We got to do a minimal viable product type of approach to this. So we don't have enough concrete to pour the foundation. So we're just going to, just put some slacks there and then start building from there. And then we'll come back. And that's where technical debt and UX debt comes in.
But we'll pour half of a house's foundation and then ask people how they like the house. We can't possibly know if the house we're headed towards is the right thing. We haven't built enough of it. In my book and in my slides, I talk about that cartoon that always gets brought out when people say the MVP, which is you wouldn't build an MVP, you wouldn't build a car by doing one wheel and then two wheels and then the body and then the whole car. The MVP is really the skateboard and then the kick scooter and then the bicycle and then the motorcycle and then the car you wanted to build in the first place. But I always remind people, neither of those are the MVP. Because if you find through good research and data that your target audience really needs a car, the skateboard's not going to cut it. And the skateboard is not close enough to a car where we can build the skateboard and go, are we going in the right direction? No, hypothetically, the MVP would be a small car. Like, it can't be a non-car. And so I think that unfortunately, we still have some of these ideas left over from 15 or so years ago, from books about what cool Silicon Valley startups should do if they're looking for an investor. And many of us don't work at those types of companies. Many of us work at larger companies or consultancies to larger companies. And it is not the 2010 mindset of, holy cats, we better move fast and break things and release minimal crap, because I think a lot of people, you'll remember, because you and I are old enough, if I can say that, but 15 or so years ago, the problem with startups was vaporware, was that they would have all these pitch decks and they would have all these ideas and they would never make a product. And people were losing money investing in these dreamy ideas that never happened. And so then the reaction to that was, well, you better just move fast and get an engineering team and build something to prove that you're not vaporware. But we've evolved past that. The biggest problem now in startups and small businesses isn't, is it vaporware and is this in danger of being a Kickstarter that never exists? Sure, that happens, but that's not our biggest problem anymore. Our biggest problem now is more of the product market fit. You can't just rush stuff out and go, congratulations, look at me, I did a thing. You have to be releasing. Every release needs to be 5-star quality. Otherwise, what are you doing?
But one of the things that I've had success in the past has been, if you do, because I was saying that there is a time and place for certain approaches. And sometimes a company just has a limited amount of runway before they just don't have any more cash to pour into the development and the producing of an actual product. And so one of the things that I've seen success with is to build an MVP that is not broken, right? It's actually achieving something, but it's achieving something to a minuscule effect. So like you were saying, if the person needs a car and the best thing that we can offer them is a skateboard, well, we're going to get them a skateboard that's extremely fast, right? Hear me out. So here's where the success comes in. It's that most companies don't have the understanding of the importance of having teams that are separate from the MVP to build the product that was meant to be built. And so you can have an MVP that's already making money and it's trying to take care of the customer, right? Doing an amazing job as much as it can be, while the actual core product that perhaps has gone through enough time within research and development can actually be shipped, right? And I don't see that. I don't really see that happening. These are the resources that we have, and we're all going to toss them into the MVP, and then we're all going to toss them into, getting the MVP fixed. Well, you don't fix the MVP. Just build a product on the side that takes over and cannibalizes the MVP. And I don't think a lot of people get that part. And I think that perhaps that's a good approach that at least I've seen success with.
But I would be asking the higher level question. I would be saying, well, what is the strategy here and what problems are we solving? Because if we have a high burn rate and we're not close to product market fit and we're still trying to figure out what to build, but we're burning money and we're close to running out of money, what's our strategy? What has been our strategy? What do we know about our users? And very often the MVP is just another guess. It's our first guess or it's our fourth guess. And I wish that more startups used some of their time or money for that early research so that they can say, aha, I can't tell you how many startup events I've gone to, if you want to talk startups for a moment, where people, when they told me what their startup was, you were like, I give you 10 minutes. I give you 10 minutes before your company doesn't exist anymore, because the ideas were so clearly misguided. My favorite one to quote is the startup I met at an event who said, we're building an app to help surfers coordinate going surfing. And my thought was, was texting, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, emailing, were all of these not working? And they're like, no, we did our user research. They really want an app to coordinate surfing. And I was like, so many questions I could ask, but I think I just don't want to be in this conversation anymore. But, this is probably a company that no longer exists because I don't think anyone truly wanted that. And it's a reminder back to some of our earlier conversation about, hey, you can run research that can get anybody to say anything. I'm sure I could find 12 surfers who tell me, yeah, an app to coordinate going surfing sounds pretty cool. And then someone might build that and then find nobody uses it because they're all WhatsApping each other or Telegramming each other or whatever. So I think that we have to be very careful when we talk about, very often the startup has the founder's ideas and we're going to make an MVP, and I always have to say, slow down. What's your strategy? What problem are you solving?
Absolutely.
What problem are the surfers having that it is solved by an app that sounds like a messaging app with maybe a map in it?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, or a checklist. I don't even know what. I didn't even see it. I just heard about it. So I say, slow down. What's your overarching strategy? Not your product roadmap. What's your overarching strategy, and what problems are you solving? And how do you know those are real problems that your users or potential users will have? That's going to get you closer to product market fit than a series of broken MVPs that you have to keep fixing, because essentially you're just working in cycles of, I hope somebody likes this.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've seen MVPs that just don't make it because of that. You're just working to fix something that should have been fixed from the get-go. So at the very least, if you are going to do it, make sure that you have the right research in place. Make sure that you're actually solving a real world problem, and do it in the best way possible, right? Going back to the status quo, what would be some quick ways that companies can identify the status quo within their organization? I think that you mentioned a couple of them, but do you know any other ones, or a technique that, because I can walk into a company and I could say, yeah, they just don't change stuff around here. It's pretty old stuff, especially when it's a larger organization, they lag. But what would you say are some quick ways to know that there is a status quo bias happening?
Yeah, when I go into companies, one of the things that I do is I do a lot of interviews with people at all levels. So, what are the worker bees experiencing? What are the managers experiencing? What about leadership and some C levels if I can get them? And I usually can. And I ask them, what does this company do right? And then we talk about that a little. And I ask, what is this company doing wrong? Where's there room for improvement? And that's, of course, the longer conversation because everyone is happy to unload. And what I typically find is, in one breath, people will tell me, oh, there's so much change here. And then in another breath, people will tell me things aren't changing. And what I've learned over time from interviewing these people and seeing what's really happening, despite what they're saying, is that they're being promised a lot of change. So their perception is, oh, there's a lot of change, or change is coming. But then the change doesn't happen, sometimes not even at all. And so then they go, well, things aren't changing
Mhm.
here. And I call that promise of change fatigue.
Yeah.
Because we think about change fatigue where people are tired of so much change, but these people are tired of being promised changes that don't happen. And I think that's a very status quo organization where they think they have to sell the future vision and the future betterment to the working levels, but then they don't do anything. They don't make any changes. Another thing that is also a bit of a red flag for me is, very often I am not the first consultant or consulting company being brought in to supposedly fix this company's problems or improve some of whatever's going on for them. And very often I ask to see the previous consulting company's reports. And I find two things. Number one, those reports are rarely
Mm.
actionable. Those reports are usually quite generic. The last one I saw was, um, Airbnb runs a lot of design sprints, so maybe you should too. And I was like, you spent how much on this report? You could have asked
Yeah.
ChatGPT. So number one, the reports are not very actionable, which means the consultants were not held accountable. But number two, where the reports were actionable, the company didn't take action.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, I'll come in, but let's really do it this time, kids. Once more with feeling. And that again is a company that is in that status quo place. They just don't want to do different things while selling the vision of change. They're selling the vision of change and then they don't want to change. And that also tells me there's no accountability, because hypothetically, if leaders and executives or C levels announce change and then it doesn't come, shouldn't there be accountability for
Hmm.
that? There doesn't seem to be. So these are a few things that I noticed, but again, that's more at noticing them more at that kind of outsider consultant person. The average worker bee is not going to see that angle of their company necessarily, but they will feel like I'm promised a lot of change and I'm promised an exciting future vision, and I don't see any strategy for it. I don't see any plan of how we're going to get there. I don't see them making changes to staffing or hierarchy or whatever. Like I don't even know how we're supposed to get there. But yet the company sings songs of transparency and integrity, and yet nobody knows how we're going to get to this wonderful future vision because there's no
That
transparency.
rings so true. So true. I've seen that firsthand and it's really sad. Well, what about, do you have any tips on breaking free from the status quo? What would be some, let's say, actionable steps or at least a way of getting out of it?
Yeah, to me, I think someone high enough in leadership to be able to affect change has to have the you know whats to say either we're losing money, so like we have immediate problems that require change. We're losing money, we're losing staff faster than we can hire them because everybody quits because we suck. So you either have to have those immediate, we're losing customers, we're losing staff, some sort of sense of loss where someone says this has to change. Or as I talk about in my book, sometimes a company does not have a strategy for the future that will prepare them for current or potential
Hmm.
competition. Like I tell a story in the book about a company where I noticed that they had some up and coming competitors who had just been given hundreds of millions of dollars in investment capital. And my question to a couple of C-level people was, what happens if these people move into your region or niche? What's your strategy to be a leader or maintain your leadership with a new company that has a better system? And I mean, it's definitely a better system. They have a better system and offering than you do, and they've got piles of money to burn and support. And their answer was, well, we would just buy them. And I said, cool story. What if your competitor buys them? And they
Right.
just blinked at me. They looked at me like a hungry bobcat, and they just blinked at me a little bit in slow motion. They had no answer. Their only strategy was, if we have some sort of up and coming hot startup on our heels, we'll just buy them. And my thought was, your system sucks. Your company is a famous mess. If I were the
Famous
startup,
mess.
why would I want to be bought by you?
That's quote worthy.
And so thank you. And so it's that part's, I didn't say famous mess in the book. But anyway,
Oh
my
no, but I
point
love it.
is
I love it.
there are people who do not have a strategy. When I go to these people and I say, "What is the plan for us to become the leader or maintain our leadership in a short or long-term universe?" Very often it's, well, sales will just keep finding new customers.
Hmm.
These are the things I hear, and these are not strategic, short or long-term plans and initiatives. This is stuff school children could do pretending they run a business. I'm going to get more customers. Cool. But, there's a whole world outside of you. And so these are some things that I tend to look for and notice that even companies with a lot of money and some success don't seem to have a real plan or strategy for
Yeah.
for the larger organization, and then that trickles down to individual product or project teams. What are we doing? Oh, well, the C levels love when this number goes up, so all of our projects are going to be small cycles of optimization to get people to click on this button more. The execs love when people click on this button.
Absolutely. Yep, that's true. And I don't know if you've heard of or familiar with diffusion of innovation theory, also aka I think it's called diffusion curve, where it's like a bell curve. And I first got word of this from Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've heard of Simon Sinek, and it tells
I don't follow him, but I know who he is.
yeah, it tells about how adoption is distributed. And I think a lot of companies are stuck in the short-term results rather than really understanding that it's the long-term effects that actually make a company, right? Short-term is going to take care of the immediate, but you could get stuck there very easily. So because of that, I like to go ahead and highlight the importance of customer centricity in building successful products. So what are some of the benefits of customer centricity, and how can that lead to increased revenue? Because at the end of the day, I know what you're saying. We want to press that button more often, and that's not customer centricity that would permeate throughout the culture and actually have a positive response. So what would be some benefits customer centricity can provide a company, and how would that increase revenue?
Yeah, I like to tell people to Google Lean Six Sigma's costs of poor quality and costs of good quality. I didn't make this up, but it's a great paradigm, and I find nobody's talking about it but me. But I'm not special. I didn't invent this. Go look at it.
Mhm.
And the costs of poor quality is a whole list of things that drag our company down and cost us money when we have not created better quality. And so these are internal costs like people's salaries and morale and rework and wasted resources. And then there's also external costs of poor quality, where now we've pushed this off on our customers and we have customer support. If it's a physical object, we might have returns or repairs. If it's a physical object, we might have environmental crap. I mean, there's a box on my front step of things we have to bring to the electronics recycling because they don't work anymore. Environmental costs. Take a look at the costs of poor quality. This is part of your ROI.
Mhm.
When you do a better job for your customers, these are all costs that you will save. You will spend less on customer support trying to put a band-aid on unhappy people. You will spend less on sales. Will have an easier time winning people. You'll spend less on marketing. You'll spend less on fixing your problems. And then there's also costs of good quality, which I'm forgetting right now. I should really Google them, but I usually am talking so much about the costs of poor quality, but I remember the costs of good quality had two categories, and one was prevention
Mhm.
and one was appraisal. So the idea is, sure, good quality costs us money, but think about where that ROI is. If you are investing money in preventing mistakes, preventing risk, preventing waste, sure, that's going to take time and money, but someone should be able to calculate or estimate what the benefits of that will be, because there's going to be money that our companies save. When I talk to companies, and I'm sure you've seen this too, there's always the disaster project that we should be talking about and we don't want to talk about. It's the $500,000 project, it's the $2 million project. It's usually something that was pretty sizable, even if it was just a few months
Mhm.
long. But holy cats, it took all of these engineers and product and UX and marketing and business analysts and whoever, and we spent all that money on this, and then some sort of really, really big disaster. A famous big disaster was when Skype put out a new version in 2017, and they had to roll back to the old version. That is definitely the, highest level of disaster project, where you have to roll back to the old version. There is just no fixing this
No.
version. So I think that companies need to take a closer look at what does it cost to put poor quality out
Mhm.
there? What does it cost to pretend we're good enough and pretend we'll fix it later when we're not good enough and we don't fix it later? And why are we releasing something that we already know needs to be fixed later? Why do we have such low standards? Our customers don't have low standards. And when we go home and we're a customer, we're furious at everything. We hate everything. Everything on my desk is crap. Everything is not good enough. I'm looking at a whole bunch of things. It all sucks, right? Customers know we suck. And we hate everything. We want to throw everything out the
Mhm.
window. And then we show up to our jobs the next day and we go, they'll figure it out. It's good enough. So forget about empathy. Forget about sympathy. We can't even remember how much we hate. We can't even be selfish and remember how much we hate when companies do this to
Mhm.
us. Just be selfish a moment and think about how much you hate when companies suck, and then go to work tomorrow and fight for it. Fight against the bad decisions. Say something about the bad decisions, because we suck and customers know we suck, and we are not going to fool them into thinking we're better by giving them $10 off or 1 month free. That's a temporary marketing band-aid. It doesn't fix our real problems.
And to that degree, we need to be able to have open discussions on how much we suck and how we could fix that suckiness. But I've never seen, or at least in my career, I haven't seen issues or problems in the millions of dollars. I've seen whoopsies that have cost companies hundreds of thousands of dollars, and
that's still worth it.
Yeah, and it's right. And to my point is that's a salary, that's a few people's salary.
And those add up. Do you think that happened once?
No. And it keeps happening because
they add up.
Because of this. It's because you're basically making moves without being informed, right? I feel that you should be highly informed before actually designing something, putting a proposal together, whatever it is. If you're coming up with an idea, it has to be backed by not make-believe, but by actual hard evidence. You have to have a scientific mindset or a scientific approach to all this. I want to talk a minute about channels. And we typically see it as a big or overarching approach. We say, customer centricity is something that gets applied to everything. But I know that as professionals, we have this understanding that all touch points are highly critical to the user journey, right? To the customer journey. Do you think failing in one channel, and by channel, I mean mobile, web, email, in-store, social, etc., can lead to failure in another channel, or in, probably worse yet, across multiple channels?
Yeah, and I think that, again, if we just think selfishly, think about a time when you hated an app and then didn't go to that company's website again, or didn't do business with them, or you went to their website and it sucked, so you didn't want their app, or you uninstalled their app. The problem is that by the time the customer experiences poor quality, the clock is ticking. And some people have a longer fuse, and they'll give you another chance, and they'll try it again, and that's cool. They can do that. And some people have a shorter fuse, and that's it. You're done. You're out the window. I recently installed an app, and I tried to get it working, and it didn't seem quite right, and I uninstalled it. That's it. The end. We're done. They're not getting another chance. The party's over. And so I think that, and if we are failing that badly in one channel, we probably are failing in other channels, because there is a lack of strategy. I don't want to say people don't care. People do care at our jobs. They do. But they're just often not empowered to do something with that care. Or they're seen as soft, or they accidentally use soft words. Like I've been telling people, stop saying empathy, stop saying delight. All the people who are counting how much money are in the bank account don't care about empathy and delight. We have to talk about risk and adoption and satisfaction and retention, and the things that put money into the bank, or into a shareholder's hands, or whatever it might be. That's what the company cares about.
Mm-hmm.
They really don't care about users. If they did, when I said, hey, I read some customer support complaints, it looks like people are struggling to find stuff on our site. Our search results aren't good. If there were empathy, someone would go, oh no, Deb, here's $1 million. Please fix that. But people just, what do they say? It's good enough. They'll figure it out. They'll call customer support. They'll try again. We are filled with excuses. And we cannot make those excuses anymore, especially in the modern day. If we think about 10 years ago, it cost so much money to have a startup. It costs so much money to start a business. It costs so much money to get a product out there. Now people can get prototypes or builds and stuff out, sometimes in weeks or months. We don't have the barriers we used to have. And somebody who has a better idea than yours, better support than yours, better anything than yours, is a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to take those threats seriously. We can't assume, they're small, they're in another region, we'll probably buy them. Stop making excuses. We make excuses all day long. And these rarely work. They rarely work, and we have to start being more honest about that.
That leads me to, I think that we need to understand some practical tips for building, maybe not empathy, because I know that rubs you the wrong way. And I agree to an extent.
It's
Why?
just fake.
I agree.
Real empathy is great.
Right.
I married a high empathy guy. I am a high empathy person. I'm all for real empathy, but holy cats, this fake empathy is terrible.
Right. And I agree. I feel that empathy, the concept used within an organization, is more so that people get behind an idea. But overall, what they're looking for is kind of like a shared vision within an organization. They want to know that you were saying empowered, and empowerment can actually lead to phenomenal innovation, testing, experimentation, and that's where innovation comes in, right? But I'm also trying to understand, well, in our conversation, what do you think in regards to building kind of a shared vision within an organization to help the culture move forward and actually adopt a more customer-centric approach?
Yeah, when I think about culture, I think the biggest problems in company culture are probably not we don't have a shared vision or we don't have enough of a shared vision. There's so many cultural disasters at companies. One thing I like to find out at companies is like, hey, when you open a job in a certain department, let's say the UX department, you open up a job in the UX department, does anybody from the UX department refer their friends? Sometimes it's been crickets, 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 because we opened a job. Sometimes the people even get a commission for bringing people in, and nobody recommends their friends. And that right there is a giant, giant cultural red flag. This tells me people do not want to see their friends work here. They do not wish this upon their friends. And the problem there isn't we don't have enough of a shared vision. The problem is that this is probably a disempowering culture. There may be disempowerment, there may be gaslighting, there are probably toxic narcissist leaders that we haven't dealt with. And so shared vision is great, looks great on a slide, but I'm more worried about the day-to-day reality of a junior developer, of a senior UX researcher, of our new marketing manager. I'm worried about what their real experiences are because of our culture. We also have questions about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I've seen companies doing things that we shouldn't say out loud, and they thought that they were diverse. No, you're not. You're really not. And so I can't get that hung up on the shared vision, because while a shared vision is nice, it's not what's breaking you. It's not what's making people. I've never spoken to someone who said, I'm going to quit this job because I'm really not feeling the vision. Or I'm going to quit this job because we don't have enough of a shared vision. Said no one ever. It's really, I'm quitting this job because they won't let me do what I was hired to do. I'm quitting this job because toxic leader so-and-so is a you-know-what, insert any four-letter word there. And so we have to be listening to this and then acting on it. And people say HR is not going to back me. HR is not my friend. They're just here to cover the ass of the company. Then we need some other, I think this got cut from my book because I started going into like how to fix HR, and I realized, oh God, this book is never going to be done if I don't cut something. Yeah. So, and it's already longer than I wanted it to be.
It's a phenomenal book.
So, thank you. So I think that, if HR is there to cover the company's butt, then we need to build some sort of new team who are the advocates for the workers. In some places that's your union, but many of us, especially in tech or retail or some of these other things, we don't have a union, and we don't have somebody who stands up for us when we're surrounded by BS. So I'm more worried about other aspects of culture and people and experiences. before I'm worried about a shared vision or its communication.
Okay. So what would you say would be a way to ensure that everyone within an organization prioritizes the customer? And it might be a really hard question because I do believe that it depends on the company, but if you have any insight, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. At many companies, I find that this goes back up to KPIs and goals, because you might have a team of a product manager, some UX people, some engineering people, and they have empathy and they love the customer and they care about what they're doing and they want to take pride in what they're doing and they want to be customer centric. But if the VP of product or the CPO says, cool story, but I need you to make people click on this button more, or I need to show that people are getting to the next step of the funnel more, or I need to show more whatever, then it doesn't matter what that team believed in or wanted to do. And so we have to look at this as just going to be top down. Now, the bottom up can talk about it and they can protest and they can bring up these conversations up the chain. But from the top down, we have to take that closer look at what are our priorities? How do we include the customer in the conversation? Are we seeing things from their perspective? I remember a conversation I had at one company where I tried the company's Android app and it was pretty bad. And I asked the company, why do we have this bad Android app? And they said, well, they gave me the old stereotype, iPhone users have more disposable income. And I said, my Android costs the same. I've got the flagship Samsung, not sponsored, but that costs the same as an iPhone, right? So why are you pretending iPhone users are in this other world and Android users are all at the poverty level? And they said, well, iPhone boop bop beep. And only 30% of our users are on Android. And I said, maybe only 30% of your users are on Android because your Android app sucks. And I said, pull me some other data. And they pulled some data and they said, actually, our Android users tend to spend more than our iPhone users. And the room went quiet. And I said, and why aren't we investing in a better Android app? These people are spending money with us. And everyone was like, well, iPhone, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, well, forget it.
Yep.
And so back to the status quo again. And so I think that some leader there somehow pre-decided that Android users weren't worth it, probably because of old stereotypes that Android phones are cheap and poor people buy them and whatever weird made-up stuff there was at this American company. I think I was the only person in the building with an Android phone in San Francisco. And so I think that it all comes back to a lot of this status quo stuff. So how do we get everybody involved in customer centricity? We remember that while CX and UX tasks are the specialized tasks of specialized people, customer centricity is for everybody, and it's how we stay in business. An engineer is welcome to be customer centric and be asking themselves or other people questions about how is what I'm building going to make someone else's day better and easier. The QA person can be asking this. The product manager can be asking this. Don't make it up. Marketing needs to be asking this. Everybody's job has customer centricity built into it if you want.
Absolutely.
There isn't a single job at our company that doesn't thrive on whatever we see as customers, partners, installers, value-added resellers, B2B customers, B2C customers, end users. They're all in our ecosystem, and everybody needs them. We need to attract them, make them happy, and keep them. And that is everybody's job. And we have to come together and say, how can we do that? And how can we rethink some business goals and some business KPIs so that when users win, the business wins? It shouldn't be raise the business, meet the business KPIs and get people clicking this button, but people hate doing that and they're coming back less and we're pushing them away. We have to find the things that are going to be the win-win scenarios. And I think there are more of those than we might have even thought of. We're going to have to be creative. But I think we have to be able to break out of bad KPIs and North Star metrics, and that mostly look at how we can make users do what executives think makes us successful.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed is that lead by example is a definite game changer, especially if a VP or somebody within the executive team actually takes that on. And something else is that the board of directors or the people that have the majority stake in the company, they're looking for how are we going to push the profit margins up next quarter. They're not typically thinking, well, how can we fix, how our customer sees us? Sometimes they do, but it's one of those things where if leadership goes and showcases the importance of this, and this is how we make revenue by doing that, and long-term effects, etc., I think that's a really big one. I've also seen this false sense of customer centricity. Let's involve the employees in the development process. And that's more like design by committee. I don't really agree with that because too many cooks in the kitchen can lead to disaster, and it's mostly everything is on assumption. But I do agree that we need to empower not just a team that's a UX team or a customer experience team. It's just not on them. It's on the entirety of the company. If you're working in sales, you should be thinking about the customer. If you're working in tech, you should be thinking about the customer. You should police these things and say, hey, I found this. And you're probably the only person that is privy to that particular information. You should let others know that you found that issue so that we can all look at it. And I think that it goes back to silos. We think that there are no silos. Like we paint this beautiful picture, but silos will exist until we start being more transparent. So I agree with you. In the spirit of sharing and empowering individuals, talk about the practical applications or tips for implementing customer centricity approach within an organization.
Yeah, I think that if you are looking for some signs that your business is becoming more customer centric, first of all, I would think that you are going to see more adoption, more satisfaction, and more retention. However you decide to measure that. You might see better morale and culture. People might want to stay there. They might want to recommend a friend because they feel like they're doing better and more important work. I have a lot of people younger than me saying to me, how do I get a job where I'm really making a difference? I don't think companies are delivering that. And that's going to affect the culture and how long people stay. So there's some of these aspects as well. I think empowerment. Empowerment is a buzzword that we throw around and we say we want self-managing teams and empowered teams. And then they're not empowered. They have a VP telling them what to do, how to do it, and how long it can take. Well, unless we want to hold that VP accountable for our failures, and I don't see that VP being held accountable, we have to give the power back to the teams. The teams have to plan their stuff. They have to own their own budget. They can't just be puppets of a higher VP. So these are a couple of things that, that I'm rewording some of my pillars. I'm a little all over the place, but I would say these are some of the things that we can look for to know that we are starting to make that change. But we're also going to have to deal with some of our toxic leaders and coworkers. We've all been somewhere where there's been that guy or that woman or that person, and everybody hates them and nobody wants to deal with them, and they derail a lot of meetings, and I don't know why we keep those people. We keep them out of fear that no one's going to be as good as they are. And let me tell you, someone out there is going to be better. You don't have to keep a toxic person. Let them go find another job with a company with lower standards. You're going to have to deal with these people. You can't shuffle them around your company and make more people suffer under them. If they are that bad, you put them on a performance improvement plan, you demote them, or you get rid of them. Stop playing the shuffle game with toxic people, because part of customer centricity is going to be some employee centricity. If you cannot make things better for your staff and workers, they can't make things better for your customers. So this is a larger question about ways of working and teams and culture.
And I've seen the upside of that. I've seen VPs that are actually, they want to play game. They say, you're empowered, bring anything to the table that you need to bring, just as long as like you know what you're talking about. And I praise those people because they have the courage to say, look, we're all humans and we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to make the best we can with what we have, and we're trying to improve our company. And if you have a great and solid solution for that, please let us know and we'll move forward with that. It's not common. It's not a common trait, but it is super refreshing to see that. Kind of like it's refreshing for us to talk together, because most people are somewhat scared to talk about, the broken things, because then they think they're going to be associated with the broken things. It's not like that. On the contrary, what you're doing is that you're getting behind a movement in a way that says, look, we need to have better focus on the customer, on the user, on people. People make businesses. People actually pay the bills for the company. And if you can take care of the people, they'll take care of you, right? And I think that from there, I know that we're on the mark, so I'd like to ask you two final questions. Number one is, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and your efforts and gain more from the value you bring to the table?
Oh, thank you. I would say some people like to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on LinkedIn. I'm just Debbie Levitt, DebbieLevitt. You can also come to the Delta CX website, which, there's no charge to book a call with me. Sometimes people just need a little coaching. Sometimes they need a larger project. Sometimes they need something larger than a larger project. But there's certainly no charge to just talk to me a little bit and tell me what's going on, so that we can just speak as two humans and learn what is needed and where you are with things. That's just at deltacx.link. It's my URL shortener, .link/chat. And you can just book yourself right into my calendar. And that's my calendar for either potential clients or people who think they might need a little help. So yeah, if you work in UX and you're looking for work reviews or career coaching, that is not the calendar for you. That would be deltacx.link/coaching. But for everybody else, use the chat link, and I'm just happy to talk to people and see what do they need and what can we do. Because as you said earlier, we think that we can just bring Debbie in for some training, but people might resent me later if I come in and talk about cool stuff and then nobody was empowered to make those changes. So we'd have to plan this out a little bit better.
I love it. And also,
Oh, and also, if I can say, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Delta CX, and we've got, I think, 700 hours of video up there now, and I'm usually live 2 to 4 times a week. I hope people will subscribe and interact, because I mostly do live streaming there.
yes, and I encourage that to check out Debbie and all her work and all the efforts that she's bringing into this particular space. I admire your work. It is great. And also, yes, please check out the book, Customers Know You Suck. It is a great book. Again, refreshing to read. I would say it's fun. It's a fun read. It's not a boring read, and you're gonna enjoy it. And then I'd like to close with asking a closing question, obviously. What do you believe the future holds for how companies approach CX or UX?
Yeah, I do have a prediction that it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. I think that companies, especially in this economy, are going to try some cheap and desperate things first. They're going to try laying everybody off. They're going to try asking ChatGPT and a crystal ball what to do. They're going to try everybody can do UX work and CX work. And eventually that there's going to be a correction there. Because a company always needs someone who's a good problem finder and problem solver. And if they keep laying those people off, good news for you and me, they're going to come looking for consultants and outside agencies. But eventually they'll have to bring those people back in-house as well. So I think that customer centricity is going to be a little bit of theater for a little while longer, while we think that we can do this by design thinking, whatever that means this week, or, quick workshops, or the least we can do, or I think people are still going to try speed over quality a little while longer until somebody hits a wall and somebody does the math and say, this isn't paying off in the long run. We should try some quality over speed. So that is my prediction. I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. But hey, that means if you want to be ahead of your competitors, you can start getting better now.
Absolutely. And I encourage that. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. It has been an absolute pleasure. I hope to have you on again. I loved our talk. And for our listeners and our viewers, I'd like to say, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Archetype Podcast for more episodes on exploring ideas that shape the human experience. Thanks for listening, and do join us on the next one. Thank you.